Hello again, and welcome to Tuesdays with Lloyds, continuing virtual conversation with Lloyd's underwriters and their distribution partners in both London and the U.S. My name is Pat Talley, Regional Director and Managing Agent Practice Group Leader for Lloyd's in the U.S. Today, we're very pleased to bring you our fourth installment of Syndicate Showcase, a monthly series event where we host top executives from a syndicate's senior leadership team to share their perspective on a variety of relevant topics and provide the audience with an opportunity to ask questions. In the first quarter of the year, we've hosted syndicates Apollo, Aegis, and Hiscox. And today, we are very pleased to welcome Munich Re Syndicate Limited, which operates Syndicate 457 at Lloyd's. Munich Re is a leading global reinsurer and is another good example of the global diversity of capital that constitutes the Lloyd's market. Joining us from Munich Re today are Dominick, Group Chief Underwriting Officer, and Rob McAdams, Head of Marine. Moderating today's session will be my London colleague, Vivienne Russell, Head of Account Management at Lloyd's. We've included a brief biography for each of our panelists in the chat box for further review. Before we begin, a few quick housekeeping details. We strongly encourage you to submit questions during the session, but please do this using the Q&A tool and not the chat feature. With hundreds of attendees and lots of questions, this makes managing the process much easier on our end. Today's session is being streamed live on YouTube and will be recorded. If you like the session, feel free to let your colleagues and clients know they can catch it later on Lloyd's YouTube channel. The link will be dropped in the chat box during our session. We're building a growing catalog of our Tuesday with Lloyd's segments on the channel, and we see it developing into an excellent resource for market participants to access specific content on demand. And with that, welcome again to our guests, and Vivienne, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Pat, and thanks to the audience as well. We're thrilled to have you here with us today. And we're especially pleased to introduce senior management from Munich Re, Underwriting Syndicate, to talk through a number of different topics, inclusive of their focus in the US. Munich Re are a high-performing managing agency, and we're very happy to have them here today with us. So without further ado, I'll direct my first question to Dominick. And Dominick, please will you tell us about Munich Re Syndicate, its history and place within the Lloyd's market?
Of course, Viv. Firstly, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for dialing in today to listen to myself and Rob. I feel very humble that we have this occasion to showcase the Munich Re Syndicate, and hopefully Rob and I will do a good job for you guys. Okay, so Munich Re as a syndicate has been going for about 45 years. But many of you might have known the syndicate by its previous brand, which was Watkins Syndicate. And Watkins primarily was a large marine energy syndicate, and very successful in those two areas of portfolio. However, as we grew, we began reaching a ceiling in terms of marine and energy, and we felt we needed to diversify, and we felt we needed to actually exploit, in a nice way, our ownership, because 25 years ago, Munich Re purchased us. So the story really was retold as 6-7 years ago, where we rebranded to Munich Re Syndicate and started on that path of diversification of product and growth. So, as I said, back then we were marine energy. We had a few other things like terrorism and the rest, but probably those two large classes. But now we conduct business in 16 distinct classes, ranging from the core marine and energy, but also property, cyber, terror, engineering, space, financial lines, liability, political risk, credit, terrorism. I know I've forgotten some, but anyway, to give you a flavor, it's a very broad specialty platform we now deliver. And through the very strong brand of Munich Re and the access to capital, we have grown the syndicate considerably. But the really pleasing thing is, thanks to the hard work and expertise of my colleagues, we've grown but also maintained a profitable position in the market. Typically, we're a top quartile performer. We're very honoured to have light touch status in Lloyd's, and we are going to look after that light touch status but continue to grow. So that's a very brief history of the syndicate. We are, in terms of 2021, we'll be writing, as per plan, about 1.2 billion US. We write that globally. The US is very much our sort of special backyard that we really enjoy working in. It's a core part of our business and will remain core. We actually, in London, we employ about 200 people, but globally it's probably nearer 750 through our various service companies, which are fully owned MGAs around the globe. So that's a brief history, Viv, of the syndicate, and hopefully gives everyone a flavour of who we are.
Lovely, thanks, Dominic. And what do you think distinguishes Munich Re Underwriting Syndicate and sets it apart from the rest of the market?
Well, we like to think we're very stable. You know, we've been around, as I said, 45 years. We're very consistent. We're not prone to hysterics. We're not prone to rash decisions. We very much honour relationship and continuity with our client base, with our broker base, and also with our reinsurers. So I think stability is very important to us. And, you know, and it's reflected in our sort of low turnover of staff. We're one of the lowest turnovers of staff in the market. And I think people enjoy working here because we're collegiate and we have a very single purpose and vision within the syndicate. I've mentioned our performance. I think it's always good to be a strong performer. It's not because we're the most expensive in the market. It's because we choose the right partners, we choose the right risks, and we cultivate those risks. We curate them. We look after our core clients, and they look after us. And for both parties, that makes for a good business. We have good knowledge and leadership within the syndicate. You know, we are leaders in all the classes we write in. We like to be thought leaders in the market rather than just price leaders. So we're very keen to be involved in developing new product and clarifying old product, if you like. I mentioned the brand. You know, Munich Re does open a lot of doors for us. It's a very strong brand, and again, stands very much for consistency and continuity and stability. And also through Munich Re, we have access to capital. And as the syndicate's been growing, that of course has been invaluable. You know, we've been able to grow, and capital, of course, we have to justify our position and our plan, but we have access to capital. And that growth has also mean more and more relevance within the Lloyds market, and more relevance within the Munich Re group. So there's a whole array of ingredients in what makes us successful and stand out against our peers. But I think fundamentally it comes down to the people and working with that single purpose, that single vision, with professionalism, diligence, and expertise.
Lovely, thanks, Dominic. And perhaps moving to Rob, a question for you. I think all of us are likely to agree that 2020 was, for many reasons, probably the most difficult year in recent memory. What do you feel your biggest challenges as we move into 2021 are?
Yeah, thanks, Viv. And to everybody, good morning, good afternoon. To Dominic, to reiterate Dominic's point, thank you for your time today. So I think just before I talk about the challenges of the year, I think just to briefly reflect on the year we've just had. And for me, there are three phrases that came quite readily to mind. The first one is the resilience of the people and business. I think going through what we've been through, I think it's astounding, actually, as to what people have been able to do and continue to do through some of the most trying times in living memory. I think the second phrase that we hear is exceptional. It was an exceptional year. Exceptional for Nat Cats, exceptional for the COVID, exceptional for a whole list of reasons. But actually, I think because of that, we may need to reassess our definition of exceptional, because exceptional is starting to become the norm, right? So some of these issues that we're seeing and how we think about the future as an insurance company, our data and analytics is critical to how we think about the business. But looking ahead now is becoming a little bit more challenging as each year throws up new challenges. And the third phrase I heard an enormous amount last year was "you're on mute." Right, that was the expression I heard, and just a reflection of our lives now in video conferencing. It's mainly me that's on mute. I'm pleased this time I've managed to avoid that issue, but it's a phrase that we hear all too commonly. So when we think about the last year in terms of performance, somewhat counterintuitively, actually for Marine specifically, it was a very good year. Marine Lloyd's numbers, a little hidden in the overall Lloyd's performance, but delivered an 89% net combined and £240 million of profit. So actually, it was an incredibly strong year. And to give you a sense of it, that's about £3 billion of premium, $4.5 billion of premium, with over 50% of that coming from our North American clients. So, we cannot win unless our North American business and clients are succeeding and doing well. So all of this is fantastic news, but it obviously has to be couched, and I think we're not declaring victory yet. And the reason we're not is because of the fact that a large proportion of that success was prior year releases coming out of some of the bigger hurricanes. I think some of the loss activity was a little slower than expected, probably as a byproduct of COVID and the slowdown in trade, which again, conversely, we're now seeing that pick up. So Q4, where we started to see a real boom in activity, principally driven by the fact that people weren't spending money going out and spending things because they're in lockdown, so they were buying manufactured goods. So we saw this huge increase in trade and activity coming out of the Asian market particularly. That's created some loss activity, some uncertainty around that side of it. And then we think about the performance and the repeatability, to Dominick's point, continuity. We need to repeat this. This is not just a one-time thing. So to put it into context, the Lloyd's marine market the 4 years prior lost £1.1 billion. Right, so £240 million of profit, fantastic, but it's on the backdrop of some pretty challenging times. And the output of that actually was the business started to see a loss of confidence from capital providers, a loss of confidence from Lloyd's and its oversight, and people exited the market. Capital leaving the market, businesses leaving the market, people changing their appetites, and we thrive and pride ourselves on continuity of what we do. And that was creating ever more challenges. And it came to the point where actually we were unable, the market wasn't providing the solutions to clients' needs in a way that it should have been doing and needs to be doing. So when I think that leads me on to the challenges, you think about the challenges of 2021, I think there are three major challenges. The first one is the fact that we need to avoid a repeat of those challenges and those problems and that lack of ability to provide a service. Right? So I think that's about discipline, that's about transparency, that's about a data-led strategy, about analytics and insights that we're going to be governed by, about how we think about the business. It's about bottom line. It's also about differentiation. Lloyd's differentiates its syndicates between light touch and heavy touch. We need to do exactly the same, and we'll continue to do the same between true partners and short-term opportunism. Right? So there's two really important things there. I think the second point is around maintaining that light touch status. So as a syndicate, we pride ourselves on the performance. I've only been with the business for 4 months, so it's a performance that I can't take credit for, but I can at least benefit from it because that consistent performance has allowed that light touch status, which really is a huge asset to Munich Re Syndicate and allows us and them to take advantage of a very positive looking market outlook. And the third challenge that we're all wrestling with is cost and how we address this constant issue of cost. 37% plus of cost is very challenging. So how do we think about addressing that before it's disrupted outside of our control? And I think for me, it's about a real clear separation between complex, difficult risks and the more homogeneous, simple risks and the simple activities. So complexity requires expertise, simplicity requires simplicity.
Lovely. Thanks, Rob. That's great. And a very full answer. So thank you for that. We've had a couple of questions from the floor. So maybe we'll just pick off a couple of those as we go. So the first question is, from a property perspective, is the syndicate's capacity separate and distinct from what Munich Re in the US deploys? So I suspect, Dominick, you'll have a full answer to that as well.
The simple answer is yes. Because the syndicate has its own capital structure, its own balance sheet, its own reinsurance program. But to say we act as a lone wolf would be very wrong, obviously would be wrong. So we work very closely with our parent group, particularly in the US. And actually we write some very distinct property in the US, which is more personal lines, Lloyds-based binder business, which is probably beneath the sort of radar of the Munich Re group. So it is distinct, it is separate, but we'd be fools not to work together with a common strategy. And I think we might come to that later when we discuss our ambition in the US through Munich Re Specialty Insurance. But yes, simple answer is it is distinct, but it is not a lone wolf, if you like, within the group.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dominick. And the second question, we were all wondering when we're going to get this question. So how is the very recent Suez event going to affect Munich Re Syndicate and the Lloyd's market as a whole? So I don't know who wants to take that one. I thought it might have.
Yeah, thanks, Viv. And I guess maybe unexpected, expected this question to come up. And I guess just a very brief, for those on the web, a very brief history, right, of the situation. So the Ever Given vessel was a 2018 built vessel that was transiting from China to Rotterdam via the Suez Canal. The vessel's about 400 meters long, which is about the equivalent of the Empire State Building on its side, 60 meters wide, and can carry 20,000 containers, which if you put them end to end, is about 125 kilometers. So it's a significant vessel. The vessel, and this is an important point, the vessel's under the control of the master of the ship at all times, but advised by the Suez Canal pilots that were on board at the time of the incident. The vessel grounded on the 23rd of March, and the canal was blocked for 6 days, but finally released thanks to some dredges, tugs, and some high tides that were favourable. The vessels of similar sizes have been navigating for over 5 years. So I think what I found kind of fascinating when it got such a media attention was almost a surprise that vessels of this size were navigating. They've been out there for a good few years now. Huge vessels of this size give incredible economies of scale to the shipping lines, but they also create some pretty major issues around risk management challenges. One that we have considered as a business and as a syndicate very closely, the quantum of potential losses from container fires, from containers overboard has been well debated. The ability to salvage a vessel of this size and the cargo of this size, is constantly it's a known issue, right? This is something that's been talked about a lot. And now you've got the fact that the vessel's declared general average, so the actual settlement of the cargo claims and the hull claims is going to take years and take an enormous amount of time and resource to do that. So it's fraught with real complexity. The point I would stress from this is a near miss event, right? How it's a potential significant event, but if we think about the actual fact, there was no pollution, there was no crew bodily injury. The vessel itself had some damage, but would appear to be relatively minor. The cargo on the vessel, as the vessel maintained power, was to be fairly contained. And the vessel was refloated after a few days without having to lighter it from the containers on board. So this, whatever the outcome, this could have been a significantly worse event. Right? So I think for me, the key components is one, this is still a sort of ongoing issue, right? So I wouldn't like to draw too many conclusions from it. I would draw out the fact that the economic loss versus the insured loss are two very different conversations, right? So you've got different actors in here. You've got the Suez Canal Authority, obviously concerned about loss of revenue, concerned about the damage to the canal itself. You've got the evergreen vessel and the cargo on board and the general average, which I mentioned, and how that manifests itself on the cargo interests. And I think probably the biggest unknown is the third-party losses that potentially could arise from this, perishable goods. The delay is an interesting topic because typically it's not covered under the cargo policies. There are some very specific niche products that do provide this type of coverage for certainly the hull interest, but not typically for cargo. And when we think about systemic, which is a word we use quite frequently at the moment with obviously the pandemic and other things, this just shows you the type of scale of loss this can create as to why the market doesn't tend to give delay cover, because it has this potential to aggregate in a way that's pretty unmanageable. So the claims against the ship owner, has a long way to go. It would be remiss of me to comment on that. It does depend partially on the causation of loss, which is still being reviewed. So it's got a long way to go, and it's just the uncertainty around it is significant. My view on what it means for the syndicate, from the exposures and the potential where this could potentially go, I don't see us having a share that's outsized compared to the market as a whole. So I think we're well positioned to contain that. We're well protected as a business. And I think what it also does is, as a market, within marine, we focus an enormous amount on our static exposures, warehouse fires, natural catastrophes, and the transit risk has always been seen as the real jewel in the crown. But I think now with this level of accumulation that we're seeing, as we've seen with the Ever Given and the potential quantums, it's really making us focus really closely on making sure we can understand and manage that aggregate and that exposure. And technology can be a huge asset to help us do that as well. So.
Super, thanks, Rob. We've got a couple more questions that are coming through on the chat, but I think we'll go back to our sort of main thread and pop back to those questions as we go along. So the next question is around, it's obviously been an extraordinary year with the underwriting room being closed at the beginning of 2020. And I think you've touched on some of these things earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've managed that? And I think,
Sure.
Rob, we were directing this at you.
Yeah, okay, fine, yeah, because so remote working has obviously become commonplace for a whole number of us, and I think we've been able to adapt with the help of our IT and IT infrastructure incredibly well. I mean, some things take longer, but fundamentally people have carried on doing the role in an incredibly efficient way. I think there is a limited amount of time for us to do this. I think that sort of goodwill and that gesture and that effort, we're over a year through into this process, certainly here in the UK. So I think there is a need and a desire to try and get back to some form of normality, whatever shape that takes. I think the fact that it's pushed us into electronic trading and digital as quickly as it has, I think there aren't many positives coming out of this ongoing tragedy, but that would be one of them. And I think it was an absolute essential, but I don't think any of us expected it to last this long. I think there is that kind of Groundhog Day feeling. I've spent a huge amount of time with my family, and it turns out you can have too much of a good thing. So I'm looking forward to getting, just a little bit of time back in the office to spend some time with my new colleagues. And I think, we are fundamentally a people business, and that should never change, right? So there's huge amounts of automation and algorithms and other things that help us, but the promise to pay, the commitment, the development of business, the prospects, it requires human interaction, and I think most of us really are missing that. So, video conferencing is a huge part of what we do, but it is a limited medium, right? I don't think it's the complete answer. And when I think about the work that Lloyds is doing, and Lloyds has been incredibly proactive in engaging with all stakeholders about the next journey in this future of the room and the underwriting room and what it might look like. Unsurprisingly, there's a real divergence of opinions, but the one common throughout is the desire to have some form of physical room, right? The benefit of having, it fosters innovation, you get this pool of intellectual capital. I think it enhances our ability to handle those complex, sophisticated risks in a syndicated way. But it also allows us to support the broader EC3 community. A marketplace requires people. Fundamentally, it requires people to service not just Lloyds, but the broader economy, the broader marketplace. So I do think that when we get back to a normal, and we're, as Munich Re Syndicate, exploring all options, but fundamentally we're an office-based business. We're there to service clients and brokers, and that has to happen in person. But we will embrace whatever changes come out of this in a positive way.
Lovely, thank you.
Can I just add something to that?
Yeah.
I fully echo and support Rob's sentiments there. Absolutely right. I'm an impassioned believer in the value of the marketplace, the Lloyds community, the insurance community in London. And it's very important we do get back to the office and we get back in a structured fashion. But as Rob said, in an agile working environment, yes, let's look at that as well. People look back on the last year and a half and say, well, how was it? Well, we survived. We carried on trading, but did we thrive? I'm not sure we thrived. We survived. And I think we have to be cognizant of that. I think in another environment, we may have seen better developments, more products, more innovation, more discussions. The juniors will be learning more. So we must be careful that we don't just brush over the last year and a half and say what a great success it was. We've got a lot of stuff we've got to catch up on now.
Yeah, that's one. The training development piece is critical, and that has definitely been lost or paused for a number of our junior staff members. So
yeah, I'd agree from my experience on my side. New flow of business, new relationships. Much easier to develop those in person. A question for you, Dominic. As CEO, what keeps you up at night?
Apart from the need for a haircut, let me think. I think actually it's the effect of the lockdowns here in the UK and elsewhere for that matter on my colleagues. It's been a pretty dark, particularly the last 3 to 4 months. There's a lot of stress amongst my colleagues. Dark winter nights, yet another full day of Zoom calls, homeschooling, whatever it may be. And I really am sort of worried. I think we'll pull through, but we must really be cognizant of the stress we put ourselves under over recent months. And we've got to really learn how to re-engage. That memory, sort of muscle memory loss that we had, we've got to regain that. We've got to work out how to reconnect. It's not as simple as going back into the office. So we've got to work very hard. So that does keep me awake. And I guess the other thing is, I've been in this business over 30 years, and the big issues, the big losses are always surprises. 9/11, the hurricanes of 2005, and of course COVID-19. So I don't know what is next, but there'll be something next. We talk a lot about cyber and systemic risk there. I think as a market, we're beginning to get our head around that, but it's always the unexpected, and that is what worries me. And that's why we need a resilient business model. We need good reinsurance partners, and to try and reduce the impact of that unexpected, because that's the business we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple more questions from the floor. First question is, Munich Re have differentiated themselves as a leader in the field of climate research and reporting. What are your views on what is next in insuring property risks with the increased number of climatological related events we've seen over the last 12 months?
Well, I think we as Munich Re Syndicate are extremely fortunate we can access our parent group in terms of all the research they conduct, and they have a lot of resource behind that research. I think climate change, we accept it's here. We are probably not pricing it into our models at the moment. In fact, I'm sure we're not. If you look at the events of 2020, when we went through the alphabet twice effectively on the hurricanes, that could have been a devastating year, and I think that is going to be the new norm. But I don't think we're pricing that in to our product at the moment. Insurance is notorious for running its business by looking in the rearview mirror. And I think we're still doing a lot of that in terms of our cat pricing. And Lloyds is particularly exposed to that. It's got a very cat exposed business model. So I think the more we learn, the more we discuss, and the more we actually do our bit as an industry to mitigate the effects of climate change as well, I think the better. So yes, it's a lot to be done there.
Lovely, thank you. The next question is aimed at Rob, and it says, Rob mentioned cost as a third factor that must be dealt with in the coming period. He noted that not being able to deal with this may lead to disruption, and that strategies may distinguish between simple risks and complex risks. Can you expand on this point, Rob? And where may disruption come from?
Yeah, sure. So, I think the first thing and the key point to really think about here is that we operate in a global marketplace, right? So it's beholden on us to do what we can do in the most efficient, effective way. So when I think about the steps and the actions that Lloyd is taking, I think about Blueprint 2 and other major initiatives. Fundamental to that is removing frictional costs from how we do our business. So I think it's beholden on all of us to promote that and to push that agenda. When I think about the business and how we operate, I do think, going back to my previous comment, that the risk of a complex nature should be treated differently to risks of a simple, like the SME kind of simple homogenous business. And that, for me, when I think about an underwriter's expertise, it's around underwriting those big complex risks, but also SME business in more of a portfolio way and approach. And one size absolutely doesn't fit all. So the disruption would come from outside of Lloyds, the disruption would come from insure tech business, algorithm-based businesses that may find different ways of doing it more efficiently. And I think everybody in the value chain has to demonstrate their value, right? That's for me really important, that I think we all have a requirement to where any of our stakeholders to demonstrate what we're doing has value. And in doing so, we can justify that valuation. And where we're too high, we as a market, I think about Blueprint 2 as a market necessity, not as a market differentiator. It's a necessity for us to address our costs. The differentiator for the Munich Re Syndicate is our proprietary data and our people. But that's what differentiates us. But the actual mechanism to process the business is one that has to be addressed together as a market.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving back towards underwriting. So What plans for Munich Re on the underwriting side for 2021 and beyond? Do you have plans to grow your US business? And I think Rob was going to talk about marine, and Dominic, you were going to talk about specialty.
Yeah. Why don't I give a broader vision, and then we can talk about some of our marine initiatives, particularly in the US, which are very exciting. Yes, the syndicate is continuing to grow, and that's very much part of our ambition, not just this year or next year, but over time. We believe we have the franchise and the expertise to do that. We are involved in that specialty area, and we think there's a lot of opportunity still. So the important thing as we grow, however, is it's very easy to get the new shiny toys, but you need the support behind it. We're very conscious of that, particularly the Lloyds minimum standards being reinvigorated. So we can invest a lot in our sort of infrastructure to ensure good oversight of our business, because how many times have we seen growth plans fall over because people are moving too quickly without giving proper acknowledgement to oversight and process. So we are going to grow, and we'll just essentially, as I see it, develop our existing product lines and just push it out through the Lloyds distribution network, be it the Lloyds brokers, be it the US wholesalers, the US retailers, and of course the MVA community. So that's going to be the broad syndicate specialty, but of course within specialty, marine has a very close part of our business, and it's very close to our syndicate's heart. So maybe Rob, you can perhaps talk a bit more about the marine and in the US as well.
Yeah, so within the ocean marine and inland marine lines within the US, we've already seen relatively significant growth in the last 18 months on our domestic non-admitted E&S platform, which is really effectively an extension of what we're doing at the syndicate. We have locations throughout the US to access business that we may otherwise not see within London. And we're completely agnostic to where and how that business is placed. We have some very long-standing, successful London wholesale relationships, but we also have some good relationships developing within the US and the team and how they're operating there. So I think, within the world of marine, the fact that we are absolutely continuing on our journey of growth, profitable growth, which is the key component to what we're doing, but also looking to retain those positions in all of those core lines. We have no plans to exit any of those core lines in the foreseeable future. And it goes back to that drive to say that we're going to stick to our knitting, we're going to focus on what we do well for our clients and our brokers, and not overextend ourselves to the point of growth and then bust. We're going to be absolutely there throughout the duration. So it's a sort of diligent growth, but we do see the opportunity. We do want to maximise our light touch status. We want to promote that as much as we can, as well as the history that's developed within the syndicate itself.
Lovely, thank you. And then perhaps,
sorry, you're going to say
sorry, Dominic, go on.
Or remark earlier about us working with Munich Re in the US. Munich Re, when it comes to commercial insurance in the US, is branded as Munich Re Specialty Insurance, and we trade under that brand within the US, albeit it's syndicate paper. And our part within that is really the marine, it's the terror, it's the cyber. So it's the very much the traditional, like Lloyd's lines. We provide the expertise and underwriting capital. So that's very much part of that Munich Re ambition too.
Lovely, thank you. And then diving down a little bit deeper into that, are you able to comment a little bit about your specific risk appetite, perhaps across certain classes of business and maybe focusing on the US?
Yes, absolutely. I think where our risk appetite is where we can provide value to our clients. We don't want to be just another insurer, just sort of following the market up and down. We want to be there consistently and as a dependable partner. And we're not afraid of new and emerging risk. We've got a very big cyber portfolio. Not an easy time to be underwriting cyber, but we think we can underwrite it. It's more than just pricing. We want to give the clients appropriate cover. We want to understand their risk and then deliver a fair price. So I think our risk appetite it develops as the risk environment develops, but we have significant appetite. We've got quite broad shoulders. As I say, we've got access to capital. So be it cyber, be it the marine part, be it energy business, increasingly property business, engineering. There's a lot of things we're looking to grow in the US. And as I said, just to echo my earlier words, it is the key market for us. Always has been, not just for us, for Lloyds. And we really want to make sure that we deliver something that's real value in these difficult times and really build those relationships and really take on risk where our client base feel uncomfortable. And that's what Lloyds does best. Lloyds is really good at looking at new and emerging risk and really stepping forward when others can't. And that's what we want to do. So, anything, new, demanding, with that, we'd like to look at it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, just from a marine perspective, I think it's important to say what we do, but also what we don't do, right? So I think the couple of things that we do that we've seen a material shift in, certainly the e-commerce explosion that we've seen as a byproduct already was happening, but has now been exaggerated because of COVID. So we're seeing a huge uptick in opportunities there from the logistics side. When I think about the US inland marine side, the construction side, with some of the stimulus packages being discussed and being promoted, we're expecting to see a significant uptick in activity there. In terms of what we're cautious about, continue to be cautious about, our yacht portfolio and the yacht market as a whole has been going through remediation. And we have a very centralised approach for our yacht account, written predominantly through London, through cover holder relationships. So we do access the US and Canadian markets quite extensively, particularly typically through our cover holder relationships. And then as far as North American commercial hull is concerned, that's a line of business that we really only involve ourselves in through a consortium relationship in London as a following capacity. So those are the two areas that we're a little bit more cautious. When I think about finite species, cargo, inland marine, SME engineering, they're all the sorts of businesses that we're really keen to push and promote. And I think we've got some great depth of expertise there, both in the UK, but also domestically.
Lovely, thank you. We've got a couple of questions. One is on ESG, which I think probably is more of a Lloyd's question than a Munich Re question. And it's basically around, is the ESG reports from Lloyd's an instruction to individual syndicates or guidance? It is guidance, and we're working with the market to agree our ESG policies. The next question is, with respect to production and distribution, how do you view the impact on specialty lines with respect to broker M&A?
Okay, maybe if I start off on that one. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? I think broker M&A, bringing more resource together gives a broker more access to data, more access to intellectual capital, if you like, which in many ways is very, very useful and valuable to a client. However, every market needs options. And if we get too much consolidation, I think some of the optionality will disappear. And again, from a buying perspective, that's probably not a good thing. So it's double-edged there from a buying perspective. Yes, consolidation produces immense powerhouses of data and intellect, but it does reduce options. And likewise, from a carrier perspective, we enjoy dealing with the big brokers. We also enjoy dealing with the independent brokers. We want that option too. We want to be able to work closely with all brokers, and the fewer brokers that we have, the more chances that the business might become commoditized, marginalized. So, yeah, and we sit as a buyer of reinsurance. Okay, there's some discussion now that Willis Re might be sold off to a third party, but with the consolidation amongst the reinsurance broking community in London and worldwide, it reduces our options as a buyer of reinsurance, and that concerns me as well. So, yeah, it's good and bad. I'm trying to rather sort of dodge the answer there, but it's good and bad. I know, Rob, if you want to add to that one.
No, to be honest, Joe, not much more to add to that one.
Okay, lovely. Before we turn to the future, we've got one last question on the Q&A at the moment. I'm sort of cognizant of time. And this question is, in respect of growing in the US, can you kindly address the risk appetite for parametric insurance and how this can be best marketed to cover holders? It's quite broad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very a topical question for us. We were one of the early pioneers of offering parametric insurance solutions to our client base in the Gulf of Mexico. We started doing that about 6-7 years ago. But what we're now doing through our innovation syndicate, we have two syndicates just for people's awareness. The main syndicate and then Syndicate 1840, which is the Munich Re Innovation Syndicate, which is a syndicate in a box, to use the Lloyd's terminology. And that syndicate is involving itself in new innovative products and particularly parametrics for bars insurance. And we typically look at more the micro parametrics. So we've got products in the US that protect solar farms against hailstorm based on a parametric trigger. Likewise, we have some more traditional weather parametrics protecting so often the hospitality industry in the US and the Caribbean. We're involved in a new, I know this is not US, but it's quite an interesting one in New Zealand called BANS, which is offering to homeowners a quake parametric. So again, a micro parametric with like payouts of $5,000, $10,000, just to provide liquidity in those difficult days straight after an event. And in the UK, we're involved in something called flash flood, which is a flood parametric. So absolutely, we think they can be very good solutions. And historically, it was just really for the reinsurance sector, but we think for the insurance sector and also for the kind of personal lines sector too. So we're very enthusiastic about that. And if anyone wants to discuss that in more detail, delighted to take that offline and have that discussion.
Lovely, thank you. And there's also a Lloyd's paper on product simplification that looks at how that can be used as well. So turning to the future, the industry is undergoing a lot of change and the pandemic has only served to accelerate these changes. The future at Lloyd's, Blueprint 2, is committed to building the world's most technologically advanced insurance markets. How do you view the role of tech in the firm? For example, Lloyd's is facilitating faster claims processing by automating claims recognition and routing and orchestration. With those themes earlier, if you could expand on that a little.
Should I perhaps start off that one, then Rob can provide the real wisdom. Sure. Absolutely, I think Blueprint 2 is a fundamental document for our market here at Lloyd's. And what I really admire about Blueprint 2, it's actually about doing something that's tangible to make the market more cost efficient. Developing a prescriptive structured data solution to the transaction of business that will reduce costs. It's very easy to develop fantastic strategies in terms of modernizing a business or a market, but the real success, of course, is in the execution and the delivery. And I think Blueprint 2 is very much part of that execution and delivery phase. And once it's out there, and I forget the exact timelines, I think it's a very exciting development for the Lloyd's market and hopefully the London market. I think it's not just Lloyd's that has the expense issue. And I think the direction of travel is now very, very clear. And once we actually have those really strong wins, we're really going to see more and more coming down the line. We have to embrace it. As Rob said, our cost base is now misaligned with our peer group. We're more expensive than our peer group, and we need to embrace technology in a structured fashion to deliver cost savings, deliver a better customer experience. And I'm talking customer in terms of both the insurance buyer and the broker. And I think we're on track with Blueprint 2. I think it's fantastic. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, so when I started my career in New York in the late 90s, it was using fax, email, and when phones were used just to make phone calls, right? That was it. So the technology's clearly come on a significant way since then. When I think about our US operation, they are transitioning now to a cloud insurance software provider solution. So the whole infrastructure is being rebuilt to allow us to cater for clients and brokers' needs of the future. And when I think about the work that Lloyds is doing around Blueprint 2 specific, just to add on to Dominick's comment, this standardization of data at the point of buying is so critical. That one version of the truth component, the data, that's the gold at our feet. That's the analytics that we can really get our teeth into, make more informed decisions and find solutions. And I love the movement of going away from, if it's difficult and the answer is no, I'd much rather no, but have you thought of it this way, right? So trying to come up with alternatives to help solve some pretty difficult problems. So then you've got the end-to-end digitization of the claims and the underwriting process. And I think ultimately it will create an improved experience for clients and brokers. I think it's also important to reference that there is a slight sense that we're going to have to take a bit of a step backwards to move forwards, right? But what we're going to be asking of people in terms of data capture will be a change. There will be some more depth that we need. Once it's done and you start thinking about the renewable side of the business, it's going to be a far easier process. We've got to get this standardized data captured at the point of buying to then allow us to just really develop products and initiatives around that. That for me is a really important point. And when all of that's happened, the ultimate outcome of that, what's the benefit of it? Well, we can get quicker claim settlements, greater efficiency, better underwriting productivity, and ultimately an expense base that puts us best in class in the global marketplace.
Lovely, thank you. And I think we've talked about it a little bit, but could you give us a sense of how you think, or whether you think that that's going to change distribution and distribution patterns?
So I just, from my perspective, just to add on to the comment I made before, I think it's going to exaggerate even more how we underwrite those different categories of business, right? I think we're going to really focus on what's our value-added proposition. And it's the complex, large, difficult, syndicated, innovative side of our business. But it's also SMEs, but much more on a portfolio strategy, right? SME in isolation doesn't stand up. Cover holder relationships, need to have scale or potential to scale to make them viable businesses, to make the stronger ones ultimately succeed. So that, for me, is how I would think about the distribution changes with technology. But going back to my comment I made before, I think it's on all of us to make sure we can justify and explain and value out what we're adding to the process. And I think we've got some incredibly strong distribution partners in the business, but there are also other areas that, there's good and bad in all of it, right? So I think partnering up with like-minded people throughout this is going to be really key in succeeding.
Yeah,
lovely.
I think just to echo that, like any business distribution chain, there's got to be value added at every single point for payment to be made effectively. And I think the moment there's no value being added by a particular part of that chain, you'll see more efficiency coming in and the chain becoming shorter. But I think that's just a simple business logic, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So a question from the floor. What are some of the challenges you have come across when underwriting cyber risk?
Okay, how long we got? Many and complex, I think is the answer there. The cyber market has a tough sort of 18 months, as we know, with ransomware. It's almost as if, in the dark web, you see sort of lists apparently circulating of those clients who buy cyber insurance, which are fantastic targets for the dark hackers to have a go and get some ransomware back. But I think that's one of the problems, and I think we can probably deal with that with good, strong underwriting assessment. The bigger problem is, and we touched upon it earlier, is the systemic risk that's inherent in the cyber business. We haven't tested that model yet. It can range from a malicious bit of malware. We had some close misses with WannaCry and the rest 2 or 3 years ago. If we have another WannaCry coming through, it could be a very different story. So systemic risk is the big one there, and not just from a sort of malware point of view, but if some agency bad actor takes down Amazon Web Services or something like that, and the knock-on effect there. So I think we have to be very careful. But I think one thing that we have got wrong as a market is the coverage has got probably not necessarily too broad, but not very clear. Where does it begin and end? The sort of contingent BI, the suppliers, the vendors, it's becoming a little bit sort of confused out there. And I think we need, for both our sakes and also the buyers' sakes, actually get better clarity about the coverage we're giving in cyber. So I think ransomware is a very valid line of coverage, but we need to make sure that and other lines within the cyber product are fully understood, assessed, and priced. But yes, I think for most insurance practitioners, cyber is probably the biggest systemic risk that we're now worried about. We've closed the door post-event on pandemics, but cyber is the one that's untested.
Yeah, so one of those things that keeps you awake at night, perhaps, Dominic.
Yes, it does. But we've got a very good cyber team and a fantastic exposure team. So, I wake up, I try and go back to sleep as well.
Lovely, thank you. Well, that's wonderful, and a very full session, and a lot of detail in there. We haven't got any more questions from the floor, although we're in our sort of Q&A phase. So perhaps we might just give the floor a moment to think about whether they've got any final questions, and whether, Dominic, you or Rob have any final reflections you want to share as well.
I think the reflection I'd like to share is that we've collectively been through a very difficult 18 months. And I think we should look very positively about the future. We've got a great opportunity. We're in a great business that's provided great value over the last 18 months and was very resilient throughout the pandemic, and continue to deliver risk transfer to our clients. I think now we've got to sort of refresh ourselves, pick ourselves up, and carry on being a value partner to our clients. It's going to be difficult, as I said. Our staff are going to come back. They're going to have to learn to re-engage both with brokers and with each other. We're going to have to try and get the whole EC3 community back on its feet, because we need to get back to that thriving mode rather than that surviving mode. And I think that's going to be a great effort, but also a great opportunity. So there's a lot of cause for optimism right now, and let's ride that wave.
Yeah, and there's a question on that note, Dominic, which is the plan going forward to have all Munich Re staff back in the office, or will it be part office and part home? So what's the plan coming back to the office?
It's still in development, but Rob used the phrase, the sort of strap line we're developing on is we are an office-based business, but we're going to embrace hybrid working. And I think it's not a question of one size fits all. I think if you like, our frontline staff of underwriters, claims handlers will probably need to be physically in the office in Lloyds more often than not. I'm not saying exclusively, far from it. But some of our mid-office functions are probably very well suited to remote working. So I think we just want to find that equilibrium. To make a kind of requirement now and a statement now would be wrong, because we've just got to see how it develops. We've got to be very mindful of individuals, how comfortable they are. There's still a whole swathe of the population in the UK that hasn't been vaccinated. So we've got to be very careful, very mindful. And, a lot of people are probably quite apprehensive about coming back to the office in terms of the office environment, the noise, the forced socialization. Some people enjoy working by themselves. We've got to understand all that. So to make a sort of a macho statement like everyone's coming to the office, like some of the banking industry is doing at the moment, I think is very wrong. That's not the type of people we are. We've got to run our business. We've got to look after our people. And we've got to be agile, sensitive. At the same time, we've got to run a business.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of questions, thinking more about the Latin America, South America focus. So the first question is, you talked about your relationship with the US. Could you talk about your relationship with Latin America and to the main concerns with the market there?
Very good question. Our footprint in Latin America is not that strong. I'm talking about here at Munich Re Syndicate. I wish it was stronger. We've got some very good business relationships, particularly in the oil and gas sector in Latin America, and some extent in the cargo and the marine book. We would like it to be bigger. We are working very closely. This is something we do very much in conjunction with our colleagues in Munich Re itself, who've got fabulous relationships in Latin America on the reinsurance side. the treaty side. So we are looking to develop in there. We can develop it through either treaty relationships through our parent group or MGA strategies. But I think we'd like to bring some new products to Latin America. I'm thinking about cyber here. I'm thinking about terrorism, etc. So I think there's some work to be done there.
Super.
I look forward to doing that work.
Yeah, I think the second question probably you've largely picked it up. But just to make sure we've covered it off, it says, do you see yourselves as not being too interested in certain regional markets? I live in Colombia and have found the market to be slowly tending to retreat into previous good ventures. So I guess the question is around, are you in the market? Are you coming out of the market? But I think you've largely covered it, Dominic.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, if you look at the footprint of our parent group in Latin America, it's extremely strong. So it's probably more a reinsurance relationship rather than insurance or a facultative relationship that we play there. But if anyone wants to discuss particular issues further offline, I'd be very happy to have a go and answer the questions.
Wonderful. I think we're bringing ourselves very nicely into time to hand back to Pat. So there's no further questions from the floor. So just a thank you from me for both of you, Rob and Dominic, for coming and talking to us about Munich Re. It's been great to get a sense of what's going on both in London news of the US market and your underwriting aspirations and more generally what's happening in Munich as a whole. So that's been fascinating. So thank you for your time. And without further ado, I shall pass back to Pat.
Thanks, Vivienne, and thank you to our panelists today. We really appreciate you taking the time. And that will sort of wrap it up. There you have it. That brings us to the end of our first Syndicate Showcase for the second quarter of 2021. We hope you found it both interesting and informative. Be sure to join us 3 weeks from now on April 27th for a Tuesdays with Lloyds that I think you'll absolutely not want to miss. We'll have our Lloyds Property Roundtable. Joining us to discuss the property market will be Alistair Blades from WRB Underwriting, Justin Catling from Ascot Group, and Richard Wood, Group Head of DNF Property for Syndicate 2010, Lancashire Group. Our roundtable will be moderated by Emma Garner from CRC Group, and we expect this to be one of our most popular sessions this year, so be sure to register and pass the word along to your colleagues. When our session ends today, you'll receive a brief 3-question survey. Please do take a few moments to fill these out and be as candid as possible. We're committed to providing you with the best content we can, and your feedback is a key driver in helping us to shape that content. You can also drop us a note anytime at usevents@lloyds.com. So let's keep staying connected, and until April 27th, take care and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.